When your own child looks you dead in the eye and tells you that you are nothing to them, something inside you dies. When they ban you from the most important day of their life because their new wife thinks you are not good enough, that death becomes complete. But sometimes, when you think you have been buried forever, life has a way of showing you exactly who deserves to be 6 feet under. My name is Margaret, and I am 67 years old. For most of my life, I believed that being a mother meant sacrificing everything for your children. I believed that love meant swallowing your pride, accepting disrespect, and always being there no matter how badly they treated you. I was wrong about everything, and it took my son Darren destroying me completely for me to finally understand what I was actually worth. This story begins 3 years ago, when Darren brought home the woman who would become his wife. Her name was Vanessa, and from the moment I met her, I knew she was going to be trouble. Not because she was white and my son was black, though I could see the way she looked at me when she thought I was not paying attention. Not because she came from money and clearly thought our family was beneath her standards. It was something deeper than that, something cold in her eyes that told me she saw people as obstacles to be removed or tools to be used. The first red flag came during that initial dinner at my house. I had spent all day cooking Darren's favorite meal, the same Sunday dinner I had been making for him since he was old enough to sit at the table. Fried chicken, mac and cheese, collard greens, cornbread fresh from the oven, the kind of meal that filled the house with love and brought the family together around food that had been passed down through generations. Vanessa walked into my kitchen, looked at the spread I had prepared, and wrinkled her nose like she had smelled something rotten. She pulled out her phone and started taking pictures, not of the food to share with friends, but like she was documenting evidence of something shameful. Then she turned to Darren and said in a voice loud enough for me to hear, "Baby, this is so heavy. Do you really eat like this all the time? No wonder you gained weight after college." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched my son, the boy I had raised alone after his father walked out when he was 8. The child I had worked 3 jobs to put through college, look at the dinner table like he was seeing it for the first time through her eyes. And I watched him be ashamed of the food that had nourished him, ashamed of the traditions that had shaped him, ashamed of the mother who had sacrificed everything to give him opportunities his father never provided. Instead of defending the meal or the woman who had prepared it with love, Darren mumbled an apology to Vanessa and suggested they go out to eat instead. He looked at me with embarrassment in his eyes and said, "Mom, we are going to grab something light. Thanks for cooking, though." I stood in that kitchen, surrounded by enough food to feed 8 people, watching my son choose a woman who had been in his life for 3 months over the mother who had been there for 28 years. That was the moment I should have known exactly what kind of future we were heading toward. But I convinced myself it was just first meeting nerves. I told myself that Vanessa would warm up to me once she got to know me better. I made excuses for her behavior and tried to be the kind of mother-in-law who would win her over with kindness and patience. I was determined to make this work because Darren seemed happy, and his happiness had always been more important to me than my own comfort. Over the following months, I bent over backward, trying to build a relationship with Vanessa. I invited them to every family gathering, always making sure to prepare foods that would meet her dietary preferences. I sent her thoughtful gifts for her birthday and holidays. When she mentioned she was looking for a new apartment, I offered to help them with a security deposit. When she wanted to redecorate, I spent my weekend helping them paint and arrange furniture. Every gesture of goodwill was met with polite but cold acknowledgement. Vanessa would thank me with words that sounded right but felt empty. She would smile when Darren was watching, but let that smile drop the moment his attention turned elsewhere. She would accept my help while making subtle comments that let me know she found my efforts inadequate or embarrassing. The turning point came when Darren called me 6 months later to tell me he was proposing. I was genuinely excited for him, despite my reservations about Vanessa. I wanted my son to be happy, and if she made him happy, I was willing to keep trying to make peace with our complicated relationship. What I did not expect was to be completely excluded from the proposal planning. Darren had always been the kind of son who called me for advice about everything from job interviews to what to wear on important occasions. Suddenly, he was making the biggest decision of his life without even mentioning it to me, until after he had already bought the ring. When I asked if I could see the ring or hear about his plans, Vanessa interjected before Darren could answer. She explained that they wanted the proposal to be intimate and private, just between the two of them. She said it with that same fake smile, like she was doing me a favor by explaining why I was not welcome in my own son's milestone moments. I bit my tongue and congratulated them both. I told Darren how proud I was of him and how excited I was to welcome Vanessa officially into our family. I meant every word, even though something in my chest felt tight and painful. The engagement period was 8 months of watching my relationship with my son slowly disappear. Every conversation became shorter and less frequent. Every family gathering became more awkward as Vanessa found ways to redirect conversations away from family history or shared memories that did not include her. She had opinions about everything from how I decorated my house to how I spoke to how I dressed when we went out together. The worst part was watching Darren change. The confident, warm young man I had raised became someone who constantly looked to his fiancée for approval before speaking. He stopped calling me just to chat. He stopped dropping by unannounced, the way he had his entire adult life. When we did spend time together, he seemed nervous and distracted, like he was afraid of saying or doing something that would upset Vanessa later. I started to feel like I was losing my son piece by piece, but I told myself it was normal. Young men were supposed to prioritize their wives over their mothers. I had raised him to be independent and to build his own family. This was what success looked like, even if it hurt more than I had expected. The wedding planning process was where everything fell apart completely. From the moment they got engaged, I assumed I would be involved in helping plan the wedding. Not in charge, not making all the decisions, but involved the way mothers traditionally are when their children get married. Vanessa had other ideas. She had a vision for their wedding that was elegant, sophisticated, and expensive. She wanted something that would photograph beautifully for social media and impress her family and friends. My presence and input were not part of that vision. When I offered to help with costs, I was told they had it handled. When I asked about the guest list, I was told it was still being finalized. When I inquired about dress shopping or venue visits, I was informed that Vanessa preferred to handle those details with her own mother and sisters. Slowly, I realized I was not being included in any aspect of my son's wedding planning. I was expected to show up, smile, and play the role of grateful mother-in-law without having any actual input or involvement in the process. The final blow came 3 weeks before the wedding, when Darren called me with news that would change everything between us forever. He told me they had decided to make some changes to the wedding to keep it more intimate. My heart started racing because I knew from his tone that whatever he was about to say was going to devastate me. I could hear Vanessa coaching him in the background, her voice a low whisper that sounded like a snake giving instructions. "Mom," he said, and I could hear him swallowing hard before continuing. "We've decided to keep the wedding really small, just immediate family and very close friends. Vanessa's parents think it would be better if we limited the guest list to people who have been really supportive of our relationship from the beginning." The words hung in the air like poison gas. People who have been supportive from the beginning. As if I had not been supportive. As if I had not welcomed his fiancée into every family gathering, helped them move apartments, contributed money when they needed it, and bit my tongue every single time she disrespected me in my own home. "What exactly are you saying, Darren?" I asked, though I already knew the answer was going to destroy me. "I'm saying we think it's best if you don't come to the wedding. It's nothing personal, Mom. It's just that Vanessa's family has some concerns, and we want everything to go smoothly. We don't want any drama or tension on our special day." I sat in my kitchen, holding that phone, staring at the refrigerator covered with pictures of Darren from birth to college graduation. Pictures of him in my arms as a baby. Pictures of him at every birthday party I had thrown. Pictures of him in his cap and gown when he became the first person in our family to graduate from college. All of those moments, all of that love, all of that sacrifice, and I was not good enough to witness him getting married. "Drama?" I repeated. "What drama have I ever caused, Darren? When have I ever been anything but supportive of you and Vanessa? Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is. You know Vanessa's family comes from a different background. They have certain expectations about how things should be done. We just think it's better this way." Certain expectations, different background. I understood exactly what those code words meant. Vanessa's wealthy white family did not want pictures of his black mother at their perfect wedding. They did not want to explain to their friends why the groom's family looked so different from the bride's family. They wanted a wedding that fit their social circle, and I did not fit. But what broke my heart was not Vanessa's family's racism. What destroyed me was that my son was choosing to go along with it. The boy I had raised to be proud of who he was, to never let anyone make him ashamed of his family or his heritage, was throwing me away to make his new wife comfortable. "Darren," I said, and my voice was shaking with a combination of rage and heartbreak. "Are you seriously telling me that you are choosing her family's comfort over your own mother? Are you really going to let them erase me from the most important day of your life?" "It's not about erasing you, Mom. It's about starting our marriage without any complications. Vanessa and I have talked about this a lot, and we both think this is the right decision. Vanessa and I. Not him and me. Not the son and the mother, who had been a team for 28 years. Vanessa and I. She had become his primary relationship, his main advisor, his new family. I had become a complication to be managed." "A complication," I repeated. "That's what I am to you now. The woman who worked 3 jobs to put you through school is a complication. The mother who never missed a single one of your baseball games, or science fairs, or graduations is a complication. Mom, you're being dramatic. This doesn't change anything between us. We'll have a celebration dinner after we get back from the honeymoon. You can meet us at that nice restaurant you like, and we'll take pictures and celebrate then. A celebration dinner after the honeymoon, like I was some distant relative who deserved a consolation prize after the real family had already celebrated, like 28 years of unconditional love could be satisfied with a dinner reservation and some leftover wedding photos. Something inside me snapped. All the patience, all the understanding, all the excuses I had been making for months suddenly evaporated. I had spent my entire adult life putting my son's needs before my own, and this was how he was repaying that sacrifice, by throwing me away the moment it became inconvenient to love me. "No," I said, and my voice was steadier than it had been in months. "There will be no celebration dinner. There will be no pictures. If I am not good enough to be at your wedding, then you are not good enough to be my son." "Mom, don't say things like that. You're upset right now, but you'll feel differently tomorrow." "I will never feel differently about this, Darren. You have made your choice. You have chosen a woman who has spent 8 months trying to erase me from your life, and you have chosen her family's approval over your own mother's love. That is a choice you will have to live with." "Mom, please, you're being unreasonable." "Unreasonable?" The laugh that came out of my mouth was harsh and bitter. "What's unreasonable is expecting me to smile and accept being thrown away like garbage. What's unreasonable is thinking you can treat me like I don't matter and then expect me to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you decide to throw my way." I could hear Vanessa in the background, her voice getting louder and more agitated. She was clearly upset that I was not simply accepting their decision with grace and gratitude. She had expected me to be hurt but compliant, wounded but obedient. "You know what, Darren?" I continued. "Since I'm apparently dead to you, why don't you just bury me completely? Don't call me for celebration dinners. Don't send me pictures from your honeymoon. Don't expect me to be available when you need a babysitter for your future children. You want a life without me in it? You got it. Mom, you're overreacting. This is just about one day. This is not about one day. This is about you choosing to let another woman convince you that your own mother is not worthy of respect. This is about you being so desperate for approval from people who will never really accept you that you are willing to sacrifice the one person who loved you unconditionally before you took your first breath." The silence on the other end of the phone stretched on forever. I could hear Vanessa whispering urgently, probably telling him to hang up, to let me calm down, to deal with me later when I was being more reasonable. Finally, Darren spoke, and his voice was cold in a way I had never heard before. "Fine, Mom. If that's how you want it to be, then you're right. You are dead to me. Don't call me. Don't come by my apartment. Don't contact Vanessa or try to cause problems for us. We're done." The line went dead, and I sat there holding the phone for another 10 minutes, listening to the dial tone and trying to process what had just happened. My only child, the baby I had held in my arms and promised to love and protect forever, had just told me I was dead to him. That night, I did something I had not done since Darren's father left us. I cried until I had no tears left. I cried for the little boy who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. I cried for the teenager who still called me every day after school to tell me about his classes. I cried for the young man who used to bring me flowers on Mother's Day and tell me I was the strongest woman he knew. But most of all, I cried for the future I had imagined we would have together, the grandchildren I would never hold, the family dinners that would never happen, the relationship that had been destroyed by a woman who saw me as competition, and a son who was too weak to defend the woman who had given him everything. The wedding happened 3 weeks later, on a beautiful Saturday in June. I know because I saw the pictures on social media. Vanessa looked stunning in a dress that probably cost more than I made in 3 months. Darren looked handsome in his tuxedo, smiling for the cameras with his new wife and her family. I stared at those pictures for hours, looking for any sign that he missed me, any indication that he felt guilty about excluding me from the most important day of his life. But all I saw was happiness, pure, uncomplicated joy, as he danced with his bride and posed for pictures with his new in-laws. That was when I realized that cutting me out of his life had not been a difficult decision for him. It had been easy. I had been the problem, and removing me had solved everything. The wedding was perfect because I was not there to complicate it with my presence. 3 months passed in a silence so complete it felt like living in a tomb. I threw myself into routines that had nothing to do with being a mother. I rearranged my furniture, painted my living room walls a bold burgundy color that Darren would have hated, and started taking evening walks through the neighborhood where we used to live when he was small. I joined a book club at the library, something I had always wanted to do but never had time for when I was working multiple jobs and raising a child. The women there were around my age, some divorced, some widowed, all of us learning how to fill the spaces that used to be occupied by people who no longer needed us. For the first time in decades, I was not checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for a call or text from Darren. I was not planning my weekends around his schedule or keeping his favorite foods stocked in my refrigerator, just in case he dropped by. The freedom was terrifying and liberating at the same time. My friend Dolores from work kept asking if I had heard anything from him. She had known Darren since he was 15 and could not believe he would actually cut off contact with me permanently. "That boy loves you too much," she would say. "He'll come to his senses once the honeymoon phase wears off." But I knew better. Darren had made his choice with clarity and conviction. He had weighed his options and decided that his new wife's comfort was worth more than his mother's presence in his life. There was no confusion or temporary insanity involved. This was who he had chosen to become. I stopped expecting him to call. I stopped imagining scenarios where he would show up at my door with apologies and explanations. I started accepting that the son I had raised was gone, replaced by a man I did not recognize and did not particularly like. The hardest part was not the anger or the sadness. It was the way other people looked at me when they found out what had happened. The mixture of pity and confusion in their eyes when they realized that a mother could be thrown away so easily by her own child. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, whose son lived 3 states away, but called her every Sunday without fail, could barely hide her shock when I told her about the wedding situation. "But surely he didn't mean it permanently," she said. "Young people say things when they're emotional." I had to explain over and over that this was not an emotional outburst. This was a calculated decision made by 2 adults who had discussed it thoroughly and decided that my presence in their lives was unnecessary. The looks on people's faces when they processed this information told me everything I needed to know about how rare and cruel this kind of rejection actually was. But I was learning to live with it. I was discovering parts of myself that had been buried under decades of motherhood. I started taking painting classes at the community center. I learned to play bridge. I volunteered at the food pantry on Saturdays, helping families who reminded me of myself when Darren was young and money was tight. There was something healing about serving other people without expecting anything in return. These families needed help, and I could provide it without worrying about whether they appreciated me enough or whether they would remember my kindness later. The transaction was clean and simple. I was actually starting to enjoy my new life when everything changed with a phone call that came at 11:30 on a Tuesday night in September. The phone rang 6 times before I answered it. I had gotten into the habit of screening my calls, and I did not recognize the number on the display. When I finally picked up, thinking it might be an emergency with one of my elderly neighbors, I heard a voice I had not heard in 3 months. "Mom?" The word came out cracked and broken, barely recognizable as my son's voice. "Mom, please don't hang up." I sat up in bed, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. After 3 months of complete silence, after being told I was dead to him, Darren was calling me in the middle of the night. "What do you want?" My voice came out colder than I had intended, but I was not going to pretend that hearing from him was a pleasant surprise. "Mom, I need help. Something terrible has happened, and I don't know what to do." There was something in his voice I had never heard before, not just sadness or frustration, but complete desperation, the kind of panic that comes from having your entire world collapse around you. "Where is your wife?" I asked. "Where is Vanessa? Shouldn't she be the person you call when something terrible happens?" The silence that followed lasted so long, I thought he might have hung up. Then I heard him start to cry. Not the quiet, controlled crying of an adult trying to maintain dignity, but the broken sobbing of a child who has lost everything. "She's gone, Mom. Vanessa left me. She took everything and moved back to her parents' house, and I'm sitting here in an empty apartment with nothing. All the furniture is gone. The bank accounts are empty. Even the wedding gifts are gone." I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow hearing those words. Satisfaction because the woman who had convinced my son to throw me away had thrown him away just as easily. Sorrow because despite everything that had happened between us, hearing Darren cry still broke something in my chest. "What happened?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. I don't even know where to start. It all happened so fast. We came back from the honeymoon, and everything seemed fine at first. But then she started complaining about everything. About my job, about our apartment, about my friends, about the way I dressed, the way I talked, the way I ate. He was talking fast now, the words tumbling out like he had been holding them inside for weeks and could not stop them from spilling over. She said she had made a mistake marrying beneath her social class. She said her parents had warned her that I would never be able to provide the kind of lifestyle she deserved. She said she thought she could change me, but she realized I was always going to be limited by my background. My background, the background that had produced a college graduate with a good job and a bright future. The background that had taught him values and work ethic and respect for other people. The background she had found so embarrassing that she had banned me from their wedding. She cleaned out our joint bank account while I was at work last week. When I came home, the apartment was empty, except for my clothes and my old college textbooks. She left a note saying she had filed for divorce and that I could contact her through her lawyer if I had any questions. I could picture him sitting in that empty apartment, surrounded by nothing but the silence of his own poor choices. 3 months ago, he had been so confident in his decision to choose Vanessa over me. He had been so certain that cutting me out of his life was the right thing to do. "Mom, I don't have anywhere to go. I can't afford the rent on this place by myself." And she took all of our savings. I've been sleeping on the floor for 3 days because she even took the mattress. I know I messed up. I know I said terrible things to you, but you're the only family I have left, and I'm begging you to help me." The desperation in his voice was complete and raw. This was my child asking me to save him from the consequences of his own choices. 3 months ago, I would have been in my car, driving to him, before he finished explaining what had happened. But I was not the same woman I had been 3 months ago. 3 months of living without him had taught me that I could survive being rejected by my own son. 3 months of building a life that had nothing to do with his needs or wants had shown me what it felt like to matter to myself. "Darren," I said, and my voice was steady and calm. "Do you remember what you said to me the last time we spoke?" "Mom, I was angry. I didn't mean those things. You told me I was dead to you. You told me not to call you or contact you or try to be part of your life. You made it very clear that you did not want a mother. I know, but I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. Vanessa poisoned me against you, and I was too stupid to see it. She made me believe that choosing her meant I had to get rid of you, and I fell for it completely. Vanessa poisoned me against you. Even now, even after she had destroyed his life and abandoned him, he could not take full responsibility for his own choices. It was easier to blame her manipulation than to admit that he had willingly thrown away his mother's love for a woman's approval. So now that Vanessa is gone, now that she has taken everything and left you with nothing, now you want your mother back? Now that you need something from me? Suddenly I'm alive again. Mom, please. I know how this looks, but I love you. I have always loved you. Even when I said those horrible things, I was just confused and scared of losing her. You were not confused, Darren. You were clear, crystal clear. You told me exactly how you felt about me and exactly what my place was in your life. Why should I believe that anything has changed except your circumstances?" I could hear him crying harder now, the kind of desperate weeping that comes from realizing you have burned bridges you cannot rebuild. "Because I need you," he sobbed. "Because you're my mother, and I'm your son, and I don't have anyone else. Because I finally understand what I threw away. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." The words hung in the air between us. 3 months ago, hearing my son say he needed me, and he was sorry, would have melted every bit of anger and hurt I was carrying. I would have forgiven him instantly and completely. But forgiveness was not the same thing as trust, and need was not the same thing as love. Darren needed me now because his life had fallen apart, and he had nowhere else to turn. That was not the same thing as wanting me in his life when things were going well. "You're sorry," I repeated. "You're sorry that your wife left you. You're sorry that she took all your money and furniture. You're sorry that you're sitting in an empty apartment with no one to call. But are you sorry that you excluded me from your wedding? Are you sorry that you chose her family's approval over your own mother's love?" "Yes," he said quickly. "Yes, I'm sorry about all of that. I should never have let her convince me to uninvite you. I should have stood up for you. I should have told her that you were part of the deal. And if she couldn't accept that, then we couldn't get married. Should have. The words that every person uses when they realize their choices have consequences they did not anticipate. Should have stood up for me. Should have told her I was part of the deal. Should have chosen differently when it mattered. But you didn't," I said. "When it mattered, when you had to choose between me and her, you chose her. When you had to decide whether I was worth defending, you decided I wasn't. That wasn't a mistake, Darren. That was a choice. I know, Mom. I know I chose wrong, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life. But please, can't you find it in your heart to forgive me? Can't we try to rebuild what we had? Rebuild what we had, as if 28 years of unconditional love could be reconstructed like a house after a fire, as if trust could be restored with apologies and need could be transformed back into genuine affection." I thought about the woman I had been 3 months ago, desperate for any sign of love from the son who would become the center of my universe, that woman would have said yes immediately. That woman would have been grateful that he was calling at all. But that woman had died the night he told me I was dead to him. In her place was someone harder, someone who had learned to value herself enough to require better treatment from the people who claimed to love her. "Darren," I said, and I could hear the finality in my own voice. "3 months ago, you buried me. You told me I was dead to you, and you meant it. You had a funeral for our relationship, and you moved on with your life. Mom, please don't do this. Dead people can't help the living, son. You're going to have to figure this out on your own." The silence that followed was so profound, I could hear the clock ticking in my kitchen from my bedroom. I could hear Darren's ragged breathing through the phone. The sound of a man who had just realized that actions have consequences that can't be undone with tears and apologies. "Mom, you can't mean that. I'm your son. I'm your only child. You carried me for 9 months. You raised me by yourself. That has to count for something." The desperation in his voice was almost unbearable, but I had learned something important during those 3 months of silence. I had learned that love without respect is just another form of slavery. I had spent 28 years being enslaved by my own maternal instincts, sacrificing my dignity over and over again because I believed that's what mothers were supposed to do. It counted for everything, Darren. Right up until the moment you decided it counted for nothing. Please, Mom, I'm begging you. I'll do anything to make this right. I'll get down on my knees and apologize to you in front of everyone. I'll tell Vanessa's family exactly what I think of them. I'll make it up to you. I swear, make it up to me. As if there was some mathematical equation that could balance out the humiliation of being banned from my own son's wedding. As if there was some gesture grand enough to erase the memory of him telling me I was dead to him. You'll tell Vanessa's family what you think of them? The same family whose approval was more important to you than your mother's presence at your wedding? That's interesting, considering they're probably laughing at you right now for being exactly what they always said you were, a poor boy from a poor family who wasn't good enough for their daughter. I could hear him sucking in air like I had punched him in the stomach. The truth has a way of hitting harder than any physical blow. "They are laughing at me," he whispered. "Vanessa told me her father said he knew this would happen. He said I was just a phase she was going through, and eventually she would come to her senses and marry someone from her own background. And yet, you still chose their approval over mine. You still decided that people who saw you as temporary entertainment were more valuable than the woman who saw you as permanent and precious. I was stupid, Mom. I was blinded by the money and the lifestyle and the way she made me feel like I was special. But I see now that I was never special to any of them. I was just a novelty, something different for Vanessa to play with until she got bored. A novelty. That's exactly what he had been. And somewhere deep down, he had probably known it all along. But the fantasy of being accepted by wealthy white people had been so intoxicating that he had been willing to sacrifice real love for the illusion of belonging. And what about me, Darren? Was I just a novelty too? Something you kept around until you found something better? No, Mom. You were everything. You were my foundation, my support system, my biggest cheerleader. You were the person who believed in me when nobody else did. Were, past tense. Even in his desperation, even while begging for my help, he was talking about our relationship like it was something that used to exist. If I was everything, then why was I so easy to throw away? The question hung in the air, like smoke from a house fire. I could hear him struggling to find an answer that would make sense, some explanation that would justify the unjustifiable. Because I took you for granted, he finally said. Because I thought you would always be there no matter what I did. Because I thought your love was guaranteed, so I could treat it like it didn't matter. There it was, the truth that cut deeper than all his cruel words 3 months ago. He had thrown me away because he thought he could. He had calculated that I would always forgive him, always take him back, always put his needs before my own dignity. You're right, I said. You did take me for granted. You assumed that being your mother meant I had no choice but to accept whatever treatment you decided to give me. You thought maternal love was unconditional, which meant you never had to earn it or maintain it or show it any respect. I know that now, Mom. I understand how wrong I was. But doesn't that count for something? Doesn't the fact that I finally see the truth mean we can start over? Start over, as if 28 years of history could be erased, and we could begin again with a clean slate, as if the scar tissue that had formed over my broken heart could simply disappear, because he had finally learned a lesson that should have been obvious from the beginning. Darren, let me ask you something. If Vanessa hadn't left you, if your marriage was happy, and your bank account was full, and your apartment was furnished with expensive things, would you be calling me right now? The silence stretched so long, I thought the call had been disconnected. When he finally answered, his voice was barely a whisper. I don't know. At least he was honest. If his life had continued according to plan, if Vanessa had been content to play house with her poor husband while looking down on his embarrassing family, I would probably never have heard from him again. My existence would have remained an inconvenient secret, something to be managed and hidden rather than celebrated. That's what I thought. You're not calling because you miss me or because you finally realized how much you love me. You're calling because your perfect new life fell apart and you need someone to clean up the mess. That's not true, Mom. I do miss you. I've missed you every day since that phone call, but not enough to call and apologize when you still had something to lose. Not enough to invite me to meet your wife properly or include me in your new life. You only missed me enough to call when you had nothing left. I could hear him crying again, but the sound didn't move me the way it once would have. 3 months ago, the sound of my son in pain would have sent me running to help him, regardless of how he had treated me. Now it just sounded like the natural consequence of choices he had made with full knowledge of what he was risking. Mom, I'm sitting here in an empty apartment wearing the same clothes I've had on for 3 days because everything else got taken. I haven't eaten a real meal since Sunday because I used the last of my cash for gas to get to work. I sleep on the floor because I don't even have a blanket left. I have never been this low in my entire life. The picture he painted was pathetic and desperate. This was my child, the baby I had protected and provided for, reduced to sleeping on the floor of an empty apartment because his wife had taken everything and left him with nothing. But I also remembered another picture, a picture from social media of him dancing at his wedding, grinning from ear to ear as he celebrated with his bride and her family. A picture of him looking happier than I had ever seen him, surrounded by people who had demanded that his own mother be excluded from the celebration. And whose fault is that, Darren? Mine. It's all my fault. Every bit of it. I made every wrong choice possible. And now, I'm paying the price. Yes, you are. You chose a woman who saw you as beneath her. You chose in-laws who never respected you. You chose to throw away the one person who loved you unconditionally for people who loved you with conditions you could never meet. Those were your choices. I know, Mom, and I'm sorry. I'm sorrier than I've ever been about anything in my life. But I'm also your son, and I need help. Doesn't that matter at all? Doesn't that matter at all? The question that mothers have been asked by children throughout history when those children need something they don't deserve. The question designed to make us forget every hurt and slight, because biology supposedly trumps dignity. You know what matters, Darren? What matters is that 3 months ago, when I needed my son to stand up for me, to defend me, to choose me over people who barely tolerated him, he told me I was dead to him. What matters is that I spent 3 months learning how to live without the child I had devoted my entire adult life to raising. But I'm still your son. That can't just disappear because we had a fight. A fight? Is that what you think happened between us? We didn't have a fight, Darren. You made a calculated decision to erase me from your life because I was an embarrassment to your new family. You didn't do it in anger or passion. You did it coldly and deliberately after discussing it with your wife. I was wrong. I was so incredibly wrong about everything. Yes, you were wrong. But being wrong doesn't undo the damage. Being sorry doesn't resurrect the mother you killed. When you told me I was dead to you, I could hear him sobbing now, the kind of broken crying that comes from truly understanding what you've lost. For a moment, my resolve wavered. This was still my baby, still the child I had sung to sleep and worried over and celebrated with through every milestone of his life. But then I remembered the coldness in his voice when he told me I was dead to him. I remembered the humiliation of seeing wedding pictures on social media, pictures of the most important day of my son's life that I had been banned from witnessing. I remembered 3 months of silence, 3 months of learning that the world didn't end when my son decided he didn't need me anymore. Darren, let me tell you what I've learned in the 3 months since you buried me. I learned that I am more than just somebody's mother. I learned that I have value beyond what I can provide for ungrateful children. I learned that I can be happy without constantly worrying about whether my son approves of my cooking or my house or my clothes. Mom, please. I learned that there are people in this world who appreciate kindness without taking it for granted. I learned that I can make friends who enjoy my company without expecting me to finance their lives. I learned that I can sleep peacefully at night without wondering if my phone is going to ring with another crisis I'm expected to solve. I never meant to make you feel taken for granted. But you did, for years, Darren. Long before Vanessa came into the picture, you had already started treating me like a service provider instead of a person. She just gave you permission to make it official. The truth was settling over both of us like dust after an explosion. Our relationship had been broken long before the wedding invitation crisis. I had just been too afraid to admit it, and he had been too comfortable with the arrangement to change it. "What can I do?" he asked, and his voice sounded hollow and defeated. "What can I possibly do to fix this?" Nothing. There is absolutely nothing you can do to fix this, because the person you need forgiveness from doesn't exist anymore. The mother who would have dropped everything to rescue you died the night you told her she was dead to you. Don't say that. Please don't say that. It's the truth. The woman who raised you, the woman who sacrificed everything for your happiness, the woman who would have walked through fire to protect you from pain, she's gone. You killed her as surely as if you had put a bullet in her head. I could hear him hyperventilating on the other end of the line, the sound of someone having a complete breakdown. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him it would be okay, to fall back into the familiar role of being his emotional caretaker. But I had learned something important about myself in the past 3 months. I had learned that my peace of mind was worth protecting. I had learned that my dignity was not negotiable. I had learned that love without respect was just another form of abuse. Mom, I can't do this alone. I don't know how to be alone. Then you should have thought about that before you chose to be alone. You should have considered the possibility that throwing away your support system might leave you without support. I never thought she would leave me. I thought we would be happy together, and eventually you would understand and forgive me, and everything would work out. Eventually, I would understand and forgive him. The arrogance of that assumption was breathtaking. He had planned to have his cake and eat it too. He would enjoy his new wife and her family's approval, and whenever it was convenient, he would allow me back into his life on whatever terms he decided were acceptable. So your plan was to keep me on the back burner in case you ever needed me again. Keep the old mother in storage, just in case the new family didn't work out. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. You wanted to upgrade to a better family, but you also wanted to keep your old family as backup. Well, congratulations, Darren. Your backup plan just told you to go to hell. The words felt good coming out of my mouth. For 3 months, I had been the victim in this story, the woman who had been wronged and abandoned. Tonight, I was taking back my power. Tonight, I was choosing myself. Mom, I'm going to lose everything. I can't afford this apartment without Vanessa's income. I'll probably have to move back in with roommates or find some terrible studio somewhere. I might even have to declare bankruptcy. And I thought maybe I could come stay with you for a while. Just until I get back on my feet. Just until I figure out what to do next. There it was, the real reason for the call. Not genuine remorse or a desire to rebuild our relationship. He needed a place to stay, and he thought his biological connection to me obligated me to provide it. Let me understand this correctly. You want to move into my house, the house you told Vanessa was embarrassing and beneath your standards. You want me to feed you and shelter you and financially support you while you figure out how to rebuild the life you destroyed. Is that right? I know how it sounds, but I'm desperate. I have nowhere else to go. What about Vanessa's family? Surely they would help their former son-in-law in his time of need. They won't even take my calls. Vanessa's father had his lawyer send me a letter telling me to stop trying to contact them. So the people whose approval was worth more than your mother's love won't even speak to you now that you're no longer useful to them. How surprising. Mom, I get it. I understand that you're angry, and you have every right to be. But I'm your son. I'm your blood. That has to count for something. Blood, the last refuge of people who have burned every bridge built on love and respect. When you've treated someone so badly that kindness is no longer an option, you fall back on biology, as if DNA creates obligations that behavior can't destroy. My blood, I repeated. The same blood that told me I was dead to him. The same blood that chose strangers over the woman who gave him life. That blood? I made a mistake. No, Darren, a mistake is forgetting someone's birthday or being late for dinner. What you did was make a choice, a deliberate, calculated choice to value other people's opinions more than your own mother's heart. I could hear him moving around, probably pacing the empty apartment like a caged animal. The desperation in his breathing was getting worse, and I could tell he was starting to panic as he realized I wasn't going to save him. If you don't help me, I don't know what I'm going to do. You're going to do what adults do when they make bad choices. You're going to live with the consequences. You're going to figure out how to survive on your own, the same way I had to figure out how to survive when you threw me away. But you're my mother. I was your mother. Past tense. The day you told me I was dead to you, you gave up the right to call me that. People don't stop being mothers because their children hurt them. You're right, but people can stop acting like mothers when their children prove they don't deserve mothering. The conversation was wearing me down emotionally, but I felt stronger than I had in years. Every word I spoke was reclaiming a piece of myself that I had given away over the decades. Every boundary I set was a declaration that I mattered, that I had value, that I deserved better treatment than I had been receiving. Mom, please, I'm begging you. I'll do anything you want. I'll apologize publicly. I'll cut off all contact with Vanessa and her family permanently. I'll spend the rest of my life making this up to you. The rest of your life making this up to me. And what happens when you meet another woman who finds me embarrassing? What happens when you have children and your new wife decides I'm not the kind of grandmother she wants around her babies? Will you throw me away again to keep your new family happy? No, never. I swear to you, I would never do this again. You swore you loved me 3 months ago, right before you told me I was dead to you. Your promises don't carry much weight anymore. Then what can I do? How can I prove to you that I've changed? You can't. There is no proof you can offer, and no gesture you can make that will convince me to trust you again. You had my trust for 28 years, and you threw it away for a woman who didn't even last 3 months. The finality of my words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. I could hear him struggling to breathe, struggling to process the reality that his mother was not going to rescue him from the mess he had created. So that's it? You're just going to let me lose everything? I'm not letting you do anything, Darren. You already did it. You lost everything the day you decided I wasn't worth defending. I can't believe you're being this cruel. I can't believe the woman who raised me is capable of this kind of coldness. Cruel, cold. The words that ungrateful children use when their parents finally stop enabling their bad behavior. The accusations that come when unconditional love is revealed to actually have conditions after all. I'm not being cruel, son. I'm being consistent. You told me I was dead to you, and dead people can't help the living. You wanted me gone from your life, and now I'm gone. This is exactly what you asked for. I didn't ask for this. You asked for exactly this. You asked for a life without me in it. You asked to be free from the embarrassment of having me as your mother. You asked to start fresh with a new family that didn't include me. Congratulations, Darren. You got everything you wanted. The silence that followed was so long, I thought he might have hung up. When he finally spoke again, his voice was barely audible. I never wanted to lose you forever. Then you should have thought about that before you threw me away like garbage. And with that, I hung up the phone. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom for a long time after hanging up on Darren, listening to the silence that had become my companion over the past 3 months. The phone felt heavy in my hands, like it was made of stone instead of plastic. Outside my window, the streetlights cast long shadows across the yard where Darren used to play as a child, back when I was the most important person in his world. The finality of what had just happened settled over me like a blanket. There would be no reconciliation, no tearful reunion, no happily ever after where we both learned valuable lessons and became closer than ever. This was it. This was how the story of Margaret and Darren ended. Not with love conquering all, but with consequences finally catching up to choices. I thought about calling Dolores to tell her what had happened, but it was nearly midnight, and she would be asleep. Besides, what would I say? That my son had called begging for help, and I had turned him away? That I had chosen my own dignity over his desperate need? Some conversations were too complicated for phone calls in the middle of the night. Instead, I made myself a cup of tea and sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had helped Darren with his homework for 12 years. The same table where we had eaten breakfast together every morning before school. The same table where he had told me about his first girlfriend, his college acceptance letter, his job offers after graduation. Now, it was just a table in a quiet house, and I was just a woman learning to live with the echoes of what used to be. The next few days passed in a strange haze. I went through my normal routines, but everything felt different somehow. I had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed, made a choice that could not be unmade. My book club friends noticed the change in me when we met on Thursday evening. "Margaret, you seem different tonight," said Ruth, a woman whose own daughter lived in California and called twice a week religiously. Did something happen? I considered lying, making up some story about being tired or worried about work. But these women had become my friends over the past few months, and they had earned honesty from me. "Darren called," I said simply. Sometimes the greatest revenge is simply refusing to be someone's safety net when they've spent years treating you like their personal doormat. Darren learned that actions have consequences, that bridges burned cannot always be rebuilt, and that mothers are human beings who deserve respect, not just sources of unconditional forgiveness. 3 months later, I heard through mutual acquaintances that he had to move back in with college roommates, that his credit was destroyed, and that Vanessa's family had made sure word spread through their social circles about his failures. Meanwhile, I was traveling, painting, volunteering, and discovering who Margaret was when she wasn't defined by someone else's needs. They say blood is thicker than water, but respect runs deeper than blood. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. And remember, just because you gave birth to someone doesn't mean you're obligated to let them destroy your peace forever. What would you have done in my situation?